Hello, and welcome to the Dense Muffin. My name is Thaddaeus, and if you're new to the show, allow me to explain what the Dense Muffin is. This podcast is about good conversation with a new guest every show as we dive into the questions that all Christians ponder on in their faith, while glorifying God in the process. Please take note that myself and my guests are not experts on any topic, but are fascinated by conversations about Christianity and the nature of God. So thank you for listening today, and enjoy the episode. Hello, and welcome to the Dense Muffin. My name is Thaddaeus, and if you're joining us today, Happy New Year. It is 2021, which is great because 2020 is over. Speaking of new beginnings, I am here with my guest, Zane. He is a development director in a small town, Nebraska, and he is here to talk about callings, what it means to be called by God, not just in a profession, but to a certain place. Zane?
Yeah,
How's it going?
Good. Thank you for having me on your podcast, Thad. This is exciting. Happy you felt like I'd be a good guest for your first one of the year.
Where do you want to start?
I guess we can just start at the beginning, right?
Yeah,
as everything starts.
Why don't you tell the audience, something a little bit, like stuff about you, like what makes you so passionate about this topic?
Right. Well, I guess to answer that question, we kind of have to go back to life after college. I mean, Thad and I were roommates in college. Some of the best years of our lives, I think I can dare to say.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, after college, I mean, you're no longer in that dorm setting. Your friends all kind of scatter the four winds of the world, and you have a lot of finding to do. Well, when I left Concordia, I ended up in Washington D.C. for a little bit. I was interning out there and lived with some interesting characters and interacted with some interesting people every day. D.C. was a great town to live, but was just not what I was used to. I mean, I grew up in small town America, went to small town university, and just that was a big step up. Then after that, I felt, urged to go pursue a law degree in Idaho. And after a year of law school, I discovered I didn't have that passion to continue. And in many cases, that was a very, life shattering thing. Up to that point in life, I thought I was supposed to be a lawyer. I thought that's what I was being called to do. And after, a year, things just didn't work out. And I ultimately moved back home and tried to discover what I needed to do next. And that's kind of really where the whole concept of being called to a place, in addition to a profession, kind of got introduced to me. After I left law school, I moved back home to Colorado and was offered a job working for a congressman here in Nebraska, and came back, and that congressman, he realized that I was struggling a little bit just because I was still, in that post law school phase, and quite frankly, kind of lost. And Congressman pulled me aside one day and noticed I was struggling a little bit, and he had a good conversation with me that really amounted to that concept of being called to a place rather than a profession. I mean, the Bible's very clear about being called to a profession, being called to serve, and we all have our own paths that God has kind of ordained for us. But just after I was introduced to that concept of being called to a place, things started to make a lot more sense. I felt more, I guess, at ease with being where I, ended up. Essentially, I'm still, I work as a development director in a small town, Nebraska. I love it. I'm very passionate about the community, and that helps a lot. But to say that that's my calling in life, I mean, I'm still relatively young, and this is my first time. I'm about at a year in this job. To say that's my calling in life, I don't know that yet because I haven't been in it in enough time to make that determination. But I do know I just feel I'm in that right place, and whether that's Seward or whether that's Nebraska as a whole, I just feel I'm just called to be back here. Life up to this point has pointed, all signs point to Nebraska, so to speak. So yeah, it's kind of an abstract concept, and I know that it's when we learn about calling, kind of going through the religious classes in college, and it's all about vocation, what you're called to do, what you're called to be. But I think it's a little deeper than that too.
So just to point on to what Zane was talking about in the Bible, making it very clear that everyone has spiritual gifts ordained to them by God through the Holy Spirit. I'm reading from the book of Romans, chapter 12. Some of you may know this; it's pretty popular. Chapter 12, verse 4 through 6. For as in one body we have many members, and the members do not all have the same function. So we, though many, are one body in Christ, and individually members one of another. Having gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, let us use them. If prophecy, in proportion to our faith; if service, in our serving; and the one who teaches, in his teaching; the one who exhorts, in his exhortation; the one who contributes in generosity; the one who leads with zeal; the one acts, who does acts of mercy with cheerfulness. So that verse clearly states that like everybody who is in Christ is one body, but we all have many members. There's a bunch of functions that each person has in this body, one body of Christ. It's through grace that we receive these. So everybody has a spiritual gift. How you use that spiritual gift is what God has assigned you to use it in. Now, it could be you being called to a certain profession. If you, like, for instance, if you have the spiritual gift of preaching and teaching, you may want to consider being a pastor, or being a teacher of some kind, or serving in the local church of some kind. If you have a spiritual gift of, per se, uh, you know, generosity, and doing acts of mercy through cheerfulness, I mean that you might be called to doing something in nonprofit work, um, or doing something in charity work. So those are basic, like, fundamental professions that you could be called to. But our question is, can you be called to a place rather than a profession?
And just kind of to bounce off of that, I mean, kind of when I was going through this, and I've kind of talked with this concept with a lot of people, a lot of close friends, and one of my friends kind of added on to it. He's like, well, it has some truth to it, some bearing to it, because I mean, you can go to school to be a teacher, and you could be a teacher anywhere. Um, and it's true that you know, being a teacher in New York is totally different than being a teacher in Nebraska. You might have grown up in a rural community. You know how it is to teach in a rural community. That doesn't necessarily mean you won't do a bad job teaching in a bigger community, or even an urban metropolis. But in some aspect of it, you go to where you feel comfortable, doing your calling. With pastors, it's a little different because pastors, they kind of get pointed in a direction and told to go where, go preach the word, go preach to a flock. Same thing with soldiers, right? They really they don't have much say over where they go oftentimes, um, on deployments. And it's just, they're in that soldiering profession, I guess you would call it. But they don't have that and they don't have that ability to choose where they go. Um, like I said, most oftentimes. And that kind of also brings to front of mind the quote I did here, and I have it written down here. It said, "Someone somewhere is depending on you to do what God has called you to do," and that's true. I mean, again, it doesn't matter it doesn't matter what type of profession you go into, and what matters is in that profession that you do eventually get into, someone somewhere is depending on you for guidance and assistance and help. Whether that be at the spiritual level, physical level, or emotional level. It all points to that someone somewhere is calling you to do what you've been called to do. Again, we're all on this planet for a reason. Everything that happens to us in life happens for a reason, and it all bleeds into where we're going and the path that God has laid out for us all. Um, just to kind of add some, you know, I would call it spiritual eeriness because I mean it's really not eeriness, but it's just it's weird. It's coincidental. A year after I left my law school, it actually shut down. The doors shut down, and those students who I went to class with were all displaced, and it was a very trying time on them. I left almost a year to the day when it was announced that it was closing. It was a little over a year, but again, I was living in Nebraska, working in Nebraska by that time, and just it hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, "Wow, did I, just dodge a bullet here?
Yeah.
Did what God was doing something in my life, and I was supposed to be there at the time I was supposed to be there because a lesson I might not have picked up on yet, but for some reason that's where I was supposed to be at that time.
And I truly think that God takes us out of places that we're not meant to be there for a while. I mean, His timing is perfect. So for you to leave law school at the time that you did was totally an act of God. Like He pulled you out of there, He closed that door of your life, and He said, "This place it no longer needs you. Um, I have another door open for you. I want you to go through this door." So that's you coming back to Nebraska and working for the congressman. I would also elaborate on wanted to elaborate on the whole quote that you had just said. Can you read that again?
Yeah, someone somewhere is depending on you to do what God has called you to do.
Yeah. So this quote really makes my wheels turn in my head. Um, I was discussing this topic with someone last week, and I think it was you. I think it was you
Probably.
over lunch. But I was talking about how being called, you can be called to a certain place, definitely, most definitely. Like God can do it. Like He can definitely do that. Um, not necessarily a certain profession. Now, it may be you're linked to a profession that brings you to that place. I mean, you, for instance, I mean, you're linked to a governmental position that leads you back to Nebraska. It may not be like big city, Nebraska, but it's small town Nebraska, and it's a great community in Nebraska. So I'm sure they're really happy to have you doing the job that God called you to do. But more on like being linked to a profession is like, for example, if you want to be a teacher someday, and so then you feel that you're being called to be a teacher by God to use your gifts that God ordained to you. The teacher job may bring you to Nebraska. More importantly, it'll bring you to, let's say, Seward, Nebraska, and more importantly, Seward High School. And then more importantly, that your teacher job brings a opportunity for you to shine the light of Jesus into somebody's life, and it could be that one student or many students are going to benefit after off of the light that you're shining into their lives, that you have from Jesus Christ, from the Holy Spirit. So I think that profession bringing you to a certain place is definitely possible. I mean, God's going to use you. We're instruments of His mercy. I think God's going to definitely use you in whatever capacity, wherever you are to be.
Yeah, that 100% accurate. I mean, right now at work, we're working on pipeline development, is what we call it. It's the thought that you have a student go through the school system in a rural community, and that student throughout the time in the school system is exposed time and time again to employment opportunities in that community. In this case, it would be Seward County. But we're dealing with a major issue across the state and really across the nation of brain drain in rural communities. Brain drain essentially means kids aren't sticking around, raising families in the communities as they grew up, and it's causing rural communities to die, or even struggle more so. Seward's in a special, it's kind of in a unique position because we have a large commuter population. About 62% of the population commutes out of work, out of Seward for work every day. So we have a unique situation. We're technically classified as a bedroom community, but we still have that special sense of community pride, even with our large commuter base. We want to try to improve that because, again, we want students to stick around longer. We want students to get into upper management jobs at some of our largest employers and take over businesses in town. But it's hard to do that when students aren't, very keen on staying local. So yeah, or again, it's all kind of bleeds into that higher purpose of being at a place to help that student, realize, hey, there's opportunities locally. It's kind of an off tangent, but not really. It's if I hadn't come into this development director position, that program probably would have been delayed a little bit more because that was the first thing I started working on was this the concept of pipeline development. We're doing some pretty cool things in Seward, but again, we've been going full force, and we're kind of amazed at how much progress we've made since getting in this position. And that's the other thing too. Sometimes, this doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes God indicates that the right thing to do is the path of least resistance. I mean, again, that's not often all the case. I guarantee you, there was a lot easier path out there to realize a life lesson than going to law school. Probably one that was a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes it's the path of least resistance that God's pointing you to go down, especially maybe after a very difficult time that He just put you through. So I'm definitely a lot more at peace than I was 2 years ago, or really 2021. Yeah, about 2 years ago now. So it's amazing how fast things change and how much a global pandemic changes that as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the next thing kind of, brought to mind when being called to a place, and we've had extensive conversation at this point about careers and everything. It's the impact of a college degree on your career path. So, we both went to a liberal arts institution. I believe you got a bachelor and BA in journalism.
Yeah. Bachelor's of Arts in Journalism and Public Relations with a minor in Criminal Justice.
Weird, interesting combination. Weird combination. I mean, I was no better. I was history and criminal justice major and philosophy minor. A great combination for a lawyer, right?
Yeah, definitely.
But
definitely true. I mean, and my degree was definitely a great combination for what I thought my career path was, which is not what God's path was for me.
Mm-hmm.
My thought to my career path was investigative journalist, which, knowing the criminal justice laws and all that, made sense to be being an investigative reporter or journalist. That way I'd know and have that background knowledge of how the justice system works. Little did I know that God would take my life and right angle it and say, yeah, we're not going to do that. You're not going to go into, doing this investigative work. I want you to be a pastor. So that's what He's putting me on this path now. He's totally flipped my life 180 and has me being called to be a pastor, which I am all for.
Kind of with me, I still don't know what I'm doing in life. I mean, I'm very happy where I'm at. I don't see myself going anywhere anytime soon. I wake up happy to go into work every morning, which is good sign you're where you're supposed to be at that point. I get very adequately compensated, have a fantastic team that I work with, and everything is just, great. Sure, there's issues, but there's issues in every workplace, every job. But at the same time, it's nothing like earth shattering. It's like regular stuff, right? But it's the profession where I'm at right now is where I'm supposed to be at right now. Now, what is it? My life's calling? I don't know what my life's calling is. I don't think I'll ever know what my life's calling is until it slaps me in the face. Kind of like law school did. This is not your life's calling. Whack.
Yeah.
It's just, this is another kind of thing. You sometimes you find yourself in a situation where how does it go? A lifetime of expectations crash headlong into reality. Another abstract concept. Yeah. So, like for me, I had the expectation that I was going to be a lawyer since I was in 7th grade. I think ridiculous age to make that kind of determination, right?
Right.
And so I went through the entirety of high school being told, Zane, you never be a lawyer, or being told to go after my dreams, right? And then to a certain point, it got that everyone just expected this from me because it's something that I had my mind set on.
Yeah.
Even through college, again, it was a very expected thing. When I was in Washington D.C., I was in a great position. I was in great positions to possibly get employment opportunities, but I never inquired or pushed further because everyone knew I was going to law school. My supervisors knew I was going to law school. And it would have been an awkward position to say, hey, I'm making this choice not to go. Can I get a job type of thing? Yeah. And again, they expected me to go law school because even some of them were lawyers themselves. And they said, that's a great, it's a great path for you, Zane. We think you do very well. All those expectations crashed headlong in reality with that first year of law school. Things were difficult. I struggled. I mean, my grades weren't, they were about average for a first year law student that first semester. But about March, the second semester, I just hit a wall. And I realized I didn't want to be in law school anymore. It's not what I wanted to do. And a little bit of that had to be with where I was. Again, kind of back to that calling to a place. I didn't feel right in Idaho. I thought it was a great place. I mean, I had my sights set on this law school since I was a freshman in college. In Idaho a couple times before that, and I thought I loved it. Turns out it wasn't my place to live. I mean, a lot of people live there, and more power to them. I have a lot of friends who still live there, and that's where they want to make their home. It wasn't for me. Again, but yeah, after those expectations crashed headlong, it sent me lopsided a little bit, and like I mentioned earlier, I was struggling a lot, and then there's full circle there, but
Yeah.
it's just, if anyone's listening to this and they're in college and they're, not thinking their degree is what, or they're going to be able to use their degree or utilize it. I mean, your career is what you make of it. As long as you don't lose, sight of your faith, keep strong to your faith, because when you stop losing that, a lot of things come crashing down.
Yeah. Especially, if you start losing your faith, then you stop trusting in God. Mm-hmm. And when you stop trusting in God, that's when things really go downhill.
And never lose that faith. And even though you're going through kind of a hard time right now with college, or your next step in life, maybe you're a senior and you're going in your next step in life, and you feel, you're not finding a job, especially in 2021 after 2020.
Yeah.
You guys going through school right now, that's more power to you. I couldn't do it.
Yeah. You guys definitely have the weirdest college experience, I think, between the both of us. So, yeah, I would also say if you're in college and you're listening, and you also, what Zane was saying about if you don't feel that your degree is something that you're going to be able to use, here's a newsflash. I graduated with a journalism degree. I'm not using it. It's definitely a good thing to study for a degree and to choose a degree and go into that, because that's how you find what jobs you'd be suitable for in the future. It could be that you're being called to be in that degree, and it's definitely plausible as that way. But it also could mean like, for God is preparing you for something else through this degree. It may not be the job that you think it is, but it may be something that He is preparing you for in the future. And it could be a certain place. It could be putting you in a different town completely, or putting you in a different situation completely, or different career completely.
Someone somewhere is expecting you at a certain time to help them, whether that be one person or 1,000 people.
Yeah.
Someone somewhere. And then, to bounce off that, I'm not using my degree. Probably never will use my degrees. At this point, it's a pretty piece of paper that sits on my wall.
Yeah.
But a very extensive, pretty piece of paper that sits on my wall. But and then that kind of bounces off the other thing. Just because you don't go into journalism, or you don't go into history, or you don't be a police officer. Those are just in our cases. If you don't go into the career path that your degree kind of has laid out for you, doesn't mean you didn't learn anything from that degree.
Yeah.
I mean, I learned how to write good in my history degrees.
I definitely improved on my writing in my journalism classes. But it's also, in the journalism classes, it prepared me in the way of communicating with people from many different walks of life, and also doing this podcast right now. Like, I worked on audio journalism for a while in school, and that's what prepared me to do this. And I hope this is being a good output for people listening. So,
and it's like an apple tree, right? Your degree is like an apple tree. I sometimes think of it. The degree itself is the tree, but the fruit that grows on the tree is the skills that you learned during that degree. And when you're going through life, you pick off of that tree what you learned.
Love that analogy.
I don't. Yeah, my history degree. I don't teach history. Sometimes it happens naturally when I get very interested about something and I go off on a tangent about the Civil War or something. But like I said, I write every day in my work. My 2020 New Year's resolution was to become a better writer, and I did that through personal blogs and even then, when I got this job, transitioned to newspaper article writing. I wrote a column a month. It seemed like, on various topics. But yeah, I write every single day, whether it be grants, whether it be newspaper articles, or just update emails to our member base. I write every single day, and that's an apple that I took off of my degree tree. Same with journalism. I'm sure it's the same way with journalism. I was thinking criminal justice when I said journalism, but yeah, it all relates back to just because you're right now you think you can't utilize your degree. Don't ever feel that way. If you're passionate about something, don't lose that passion. Because I'm passionate about history. I'm sure Dad's passionate about journalism. Definitely passionate about religion.
Yeah.
And just don't lose that passion. And don't lose that thought or lose the thought that you'll never find a job because you don't see yourself working in that degree. You're meant to be there, and you're meant to be doing what you're doing. So never lose that.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to share it with your friends and your family, your neighbor that may benefit from this. Also, if you have any questions, or if you like this podcast and you want to say something about it, there is a way to contact me. I have created an email address for this podcast. It is densemuffinpodcast@gmail.com. So go ahead and use that and send whatever questions you may have. Like if you have a question, that would be a good topic for the podcast in future episodes. Or if you would just like to give feedback, positive or negative, I'm open to any.
Today's discussion has been very informational and fruitful, I think. If we can take anything from this, we can take that God can use any of us in any profession, in any place, to further His kingdom. If you are listening today and you were able to take something from this conversation, great. I hope that you can take whatever you learned and apply it to your life, in also your calling that you are feeling you're going into, that you're being led into by God. Just remember, God can use every one of us to shine a light in others' lives, wherever that may be. And also, we each have a spiritual gift that we can use in whatever calling that we are led to. Everybody has a plan. Everybody has a purpose on earth. It's just up to us to trust God in His worldview rather than our worldview. Zane, again, thank you for joining me today.
Of course, it was fun. A lot of good discussion being had here. Your podcasts keep getting better and better, and I'm honored that I'll be the first episode this season.
Yeah.
Sorry, listeners. Just kidding. But yeah, Thad, thank you so much for having me on.
As always, my name's Thaddaeus, and I hope that God is using you to further His kingdom in whatever season you are in right now.
Man, that's dirt.